Ready to make some sauce, Iggy? You probably shouldn't be involved.
Tomato sauce is one of those must-haves. Let's face it, very few folks, at least in the United States, are fluent in the kitchen, at least to the level that some of our ancestors, of even as recently as 3 generations ago, and most nights we need to figure out what's for dinner only a handful of minutes before dinner actually starts. Enter tomato sauce. Each fall, at some point in September, depending upon the occurrence of frost, it's time to dig out the supplies, set up an outside workstation, and make and preserve tomato sauce. When it comes to any large-scale food preservation projects like this, I like to work outside. It's much easier to clean up when you can just hose things down every once in a while. I've tried several tomato sauce recipes over the years. I'm not sure I've landed on the one, but the recipe I'm most enamored with right now I got from Daniel Gritzer, the managing culinary editor of Serious Eats. It's more complicated than any sauce recipe I've tried yet, but that's never stopped me from doing anything, and in fact, making it challenging is usually a surefire way to get me to do something. Plus, when I came across this recipe, I realized I was going to learn to make tomato paste from scratch, and that's pretty cool. In addition to the sauce, this is a perfect time to save tomato seeds. I mean, I'm cutting up tomatoes left and right, I've got the hose on, and nobody eating sauce in January cares or needs to know what the tomato looked like before it went into the sauce pot. So if a few of them had all the seeds squeezed out of them to ferment in a yogurt container, all the better. As with any crop from which you'd like to collect and save seeds, it's important to understand what you're doing. Essentially, you're attempting to replicate characteristics from the fruit that produced those seeds. In other words, pick your best ones. Today, I'm saving seeds from 3 different varieties, or more accurately, I'm beginning the process of saving those seeds. With tomatoes, it takes several days because they have to ferment, though there's very little work involved, at least on my scale. The first step is to get access to the seed cavities within the tomato. In my case, I go to the extra trouble of cutting away the blemish parts of the fruits in question. If you're just saving seeds, there's no need to do this. But I'm going to add the flesh of the tomatoes to my sauce, and it's easier to do this before the seeds are squeezed from their cavities. You need to have something in which to collect the seeds. Preferably, you want something with a cover on it, and something that is quite a few times larger than the material inside, i.e. the seeds, tomato flesh, and the gelatinous material surrounding the seeds. You want the cover because tomato seeds need to be fermented, and the process produces some pretty rank smells. You want a container that's large enough to hold not only the seeds, but a substantial amount of water, though that will come later, after the fermentation process is complete. One of the reasons I like to combine sauce making and seed saving is that it's always bothered me that there's so much waste involved with the seed saving process. Every seed that's produced for commercial seed companies, the good companies and the terrible, comes from a fruit that was grown for the express purpose of producing seeds, which means it was never meant to be eaten and it won't be eaten. On some level, this isn't at all wasteful. After all, if we don't save seed from this year's crops, we won't eat next year. That's been the way of agriculture since it was discovered. But that's a lot of food that doesn't get eaten. In most cases, that's unavoidable. You can't save peas and eat them in soup as well. But, at least in the case of tomatoes, there's a use for the flesh that surrounded those seeds, and it just seems such a shame to waste the most beautiful tomatoes of the year. If I'd ever really thought about it, beyond, gee, I wish I could make tomato paste, I probably could have figured out exactly how it's done. After learning how, in retrospect, it seems pretty obvious. Low, slow heat over a long period of time with a whole lot of surface area. What you get out of that is a lot of evaporation. While I was filling the cookie sheet, I figured, hey, I only need one, that's great, fewer dishes to wash. It was right around this point when I thought, yeah, I probably should have used them both. Once I got the cookie sheet in the oven, and cleaned up all the stuff I'd spilled in the process, I got started on the next part. I mentioned that this sauce recipe comes from Daniel Glitzer. I watched a video on YouTube to learn how to make it, using his method. The only thing I didn't really care for is his take on this home-scale food mill. He refers to them as dinky. I know what he means, and he's right. It's definitely not as nice as a larger industrial-scale food mill. The problem I have is that I think that might discourage the average person from trying it out. Of course, like with anything, the nicer and bigger your equipment, the more efficient and easier it's probably going to be to accomplish your task. But there's absolutely no reason a food mill like this, a home-scale model, won't work perfectly well to make sauce for the average person. And if you've priced out an industrial one, they're cost prohibitive. This is the part where you take out and reserve a little bit of the sauce that you've made so far, to preserve the really fresh flavor. Once I've reduced the rest of the sauce in volume and got rid of most of the water to intensify the flavor, I'm going to add this part back in. That, I think, is the true stroke of genius with Daniel Glitzer's method. This is not a quick process, as you can see from the time on the stove. And, in fact, it's 7:32 in the evening, the day after I began. I cut up the tomatoes yesterday. After more than a full day of simmering and reducing, it's time to get started on some serious flavor additions. When I said this wasn't a quick process, I wasn't kidding. This is day 3. As you can see, after simmering through an evening, then sitting overnight, then simmering again all day, the sauce has been reduced quite a bit. And here is what the tomato paste looks like after 2.5 days or so of reduction. That time would have been significantly reduced, and I would have made far less of a mess if I had used both cookie sheets. And now, just before canning, it's time to add all those different parts back together. The fresher juice, the tomato paste, and a few sprigs of basil, which I just ran out to the greenhouse to get. And with that, our pantry just became a little more well-stocked. A series of winter nights became a little less hectic, and summer officially became fall.